Welcome to the Living Library podcast series, in which we explore stories and experiences on topics that we typically don't talk openly about. This episode features Emma Brooks talking about her experience with a hidden disability. To find out more about the Living Library, any of the stories featured, or to book an appointment for your own conversation with one of the books, search for the words Living Library on the hub. Emma, thanks for joining me today and giving us a glimpse into your story. Can you share with us what's the title of your book?
Thanks, Rebecca. I've named it after one of my favourite Red Hot Chili Peppers songs. So I've called it Scar Tissue That I Wish You Saw. And it's about the hidden challenge of invisible disability.
And can you give us a quick overview of your story, Emma?
Yeah, the synopsis really is that I've spoken previously to university colleagues in the form of a video about my challenges with mental health, long-term anxiety and depression. But I wanted to take an opportunity to speak about my experience of living with a condition called fibromyalgia.
And why did you decide to become a Living Library book?
There's a few reasons, really. I've been really inspired by other people who have been books in the library, inspired by their bravery and their authenticity. As I said, I've spoken about mental health, but I think there is something about speaking about disability and especially the hidden or non-visible disabilities, and that bringing those subjects into the open helps to reduce stigma. So in terms of my condition itself, it's something that Lady Gaga has, and she spoke very openly about it in her documentary, which was called 5'2". And I think there's a great power in that, and in knowing that if it's something you're going through, then you're not going through it alone.
Sounds really interesting, and I don't know anything about the condition, so I'm hopefully going to learn something by talking to you today as well. So do you have chapters in your story, or how do you arrange your book?
So yeah, I've given some chapters in a sort of chronological order, really. And my first chapter is fibro. What did you say? Because certainly when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, it wasn't a very known condition. I would often have doctors ask me what it was. It's now much more readily diagnosed. It's much more available. There's information available online, and they actually say now that it affects about 1 in 20 people. So one of my chapters is talking through fibromyalgia, which is a long-term condition that causes widespread pain and extreme tiredness. I've then got a chapter about the power of a name, which is really about the point of diagnosis. And that was a pivotal moment for me in terms of knowing that my pain was real. It wasn't imagined. The condition is real. It's now got a name, and I can refer to something rather than just experiencing a lot of symptoms that don't really connect to any other diagnosis. So the power of a name was just that moment where knowing what it was called had such a powerful impact. I've also got a chapter called This is a Low, and that's the hardest point, I suppose, not long after being diagnosed, where the pain was at its most severe. I'd had to give up a number of aspects of my life, my work life, my private life, my social life, and it was the most difficult time as well in terms of mental health and depression in particular. Then moving on, I've got a chapter called Life with Limits, which is about living with chronic pain and learning to adapt and grow in terms of understanding where my limits are, how to stick to them, how to listen when my body is telling me something. For me, stress is a big trigger, so I always have to manage mental health and emotional well-being to be able to carry on. And then I've got a chapter called How You Can Help, which I think is for a lot of people don't really know how to react when somebody tells them that they have a condition, whether that's mental health or physical condition. And it's just a bit of a sort of what works well. Most people are happy to talk. So if people are non-judgmental and if they ask politely and actually listen to the answer that the person gives them, then that's a really good way to have a good conversation about different conditions that you might not be familiar with.
So Emma, tell me a bit more about how the condition affects you on a day-to-day basis. What does it impact in your working life and your home life?
Yeah, it's a very interesting condition. It's a collection of symptoms, basically, rather than any one thing. But there's no cure. It's a chronic condition, but treatments can help relieve some of the symptoms. And one of the problems with fibromyalgia is it's very hard to diagnose. So for me, the main symptom is pain all over the body, which is both persistent, so you have some pain all the time, and it's also variable. So I can have more severe flare-ups, and I can have flare-ups that last for a year or more, and I can have flare-ups that last for a week or so. So it's a very difficult condition to manage. The other element is non-restorative sleep. So you can have a full night's sleep but still wake up feeling unrefreshed and fatigued. So it's something I have to sort of guarantee I get 9 hours a night. Otherwise, I'm not really productive at all. And then topping up at the weekend. So sleep is a very important factor, especially for me. We don't really know what causes fibromyalgia as a condition. There's some research that it links to abnormal brain chemistry and also the central nervous system in terms of how pain messages are communicated through the body. My mum has it. Mum has a complex group of musculoskeletal conditions, so it's very likely that I had a genetic disposition, but it's also found to be triggered by trauma or stress. So a series of traumatic events in my life between the ages of sort of 16 and 20 are likely what determined that the condition came out at that point in my life. So as I say, it's a myriad of conditions. So anxiety and depression can also be part of it, and also IBS. And for me, I have some other side conditions such as underactive thyroid and sleep apnea. So it's a jumble of different symptoms at different times.
No wonder it's hard to diagnose when there are so many different presenting symptoms that you have to deal with. And I find it really fascinating listening to you, because knowing you in the workplace, you are incredibly productive, you're very proactive, you get a lot done. And so hearing that actually at the same time you're grappling with all of these symptoms that to different intensities at different times, it's interesting. And I think there are many people that are also dealing with other hidden disabilities.
Absolutely. And the term invisible disability can be known as non-visible, hidden, non-apparent. And it's sort of, I did some research prior to this, and it's any physical, mental or emotional impairment that goes largely unnoticed. And not only chronic conditions such as fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, but also cognitive impairment and brain injury, the autism spectrum, people who are deaf and hard of hearing, anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses. And it's a very complex position. And one of the key elements I have in the How to Help is not judge, because you don't know what somebody else is going through. You don't know that I'm waiting for the lift because I'm doing that because I'm having a bad week and I just can't manage the stairs that week. I also say when people are using blue badges, I don't have a blue badge. I'm not in a severe state of fibromyalgia at present, but if you're judging someone who's parking in a blue badge space but doesn't appear to have a disability, then you don't know what condition that person might have. Or when somebody uses an accessibility toilet, you don't know what condition they might have. So there are a whole realm of conditions that people live with and carry out productive and seemingly normal lives, but under the surface they might be going through a range of different conditions, symptoms. For myself, the treatment is long-term medication. I try and avoid pain medication because it is something that you can become very quickly reliant on. So I only use very low levels of pain medication when I need to. But there has been times when that's been a much greater level that has been needed.
So Emma, in your story, are there any key moments that had more of a profound impact on you?
Yeah, there is. There's two really. I've identified sort of two key moments, and the first was the diagnosis that this is a real condition. It's not just in my head. It's bittersweet because it's also knowing that it is a chronic condition, that there's no cure, that no one's going to give me a magic pill or a magic injection or even a surgery that is going to help this. It's something I'm going to have to manage and continue to manage for the rest of my life. So although the diagnosis was great news and also a realization that it's a very long-term aspect that was life-changing for me at that time, because I'd had to give up my job. I was a manager in a hospitality industry, and it was a very physical role, and I just had to give up work completely because I couldn't do it. I'd had to sign up for disability benefits, and it was just a really difficult time. I'd had to stop going to gigs with friends because I couldn't stand up for that long. You really start to feel the things that you're missing out on. And then the second key moment is not too far on from that, which was the graduation of my BA Honours degree. And it leads on because I had to give up work, and I sort of took that opportunity to go to uni as a mature student. I managed to come out with a business degree within 2 years because of some previous study, and then I went on to study HR at a postgraduate level. So there was the driving force, I suppose, of having to give up work, having to go on benefits, having to think about a completely different career path, and having to think about a career that wouldn't involve physical effort, but would involve knowledge and skill and experience. So I had to do a lot of realization, and I think coming out with the degree was a real turning point towards the future.
That sounds really positive, that you've turned it around, and actually you're very good, in my opinion, you're very good at your job and your career. So it's a good fit for you, I think.
Yes.
So if someone were to book an appointment with you, what could they expect from the conversation, Emma?
I'm an open book, really. So for me, it's very much, I'm happy to talk about any of the elements that I've mentioned here today. As I said earlier, we believe my fibromyalgia was triggered by a series of traumatic events, and I'm happy to talk to people about those events in the hope that it might be something that resonates with someone else, or helps someone to support a friend or family member who's going through something similar. So for me, those events were started by the Manchester IRA bomb in the 90s, when I was 16 and present on the day. I had an early relationship in my 18-19, where there was a lot of domestic abuse and domestic violence. And then I was also the victim of a stalker. So those are all things that really have had an important, long-lasting effect on my life. And I think talking about these situations again just helps to reduce the stigma attached to the labels that are associated with them, but also helping people to see how they might be able to support somebody else.
I think each of those things you've just mentioned could be
a story in themselves.
Yeah, they could. And I think because you're open and willing to talk, I would encourage anybody who has experienced similar things to come and speak with you. Mm-hmm. I think that would be beneficial for both you and the other person.
It is, and it's the thing. When I started seeing a therapist a year ago, and I said I need to get to the bottom of some of my anxiety and some of my depression, and I said I had a really happy childhood, I had a really lovely upbringing. I don't know why I have all these issues, and then you start to unpack them, and you go, oh, and then this, oh, and then this, and you suddenly realize that these things that you dismissed at the time, or in my case, it was putting them in a small box and putting them on a shelf and just thinking I won't ever think about that again. They actually had a long-term impact, and it's only by digging deeper and getting to the real issue at hand is how I've then been able to start to address how they impact my life now. If it helps anybody else in terms of their own experience or the experience of a friend or family member, I'm happy to help.
Thanks, Emma. That's really great, and thank you for sharing that. Finally, there's a question that I ask all of the Living Library books. How would you describe your story in 3 words?
The 3 words I've put together is that it's bittersweet. It's a bittersweet story, and it's about self-acceptance and tenacity. Those are the 3 words I've come up with for you.
Thanks very much for sharing with us today, Emma.
Thanks, Rebecca.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Living Library podcast series. If you'd like to book an appointment with Emma, details of how to do this are on the Living Library Hub page. To find it, just search for the words Living Library on the Hub.